And that's actually a perfect little segue into what I wanted to get into is how did you discover that there was a need somewhere and then it was time to venture off and start co-founding your own thing?
Oh, wow. Uh, how did I discover that? Well, wow, this is really, so you have to go back to the 90s,
Okay.
the 1990s. So last century when this happened. Uh,
Welcome back to the Dumpster Fire Project. I'm Murray. Along with me is my co-host Eric, and today we have a guest that just brings a wealth of knowledge. I've known him for a while, but man, preparing for this show, I didn't realize how much you had. So without further ado, everyone, the man, the myth, the legend, Ken Jones. How are you?
hey,
Yeah.
glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, just a little background on Ken himself. You've got over 30 years experience in the industry and really is focused around portfolio management, product management. You've worked with Fortune 100, you've done pharmaceuticals, you work with me in the med device. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, really look forward to jumping into it. So, overall, how you doing? How you doing during the unique times we're in right now?
That's a really good question. I have to first of all, I do have pants on
Okay.
for this, which of course since March has been optional. But
Yeah.
and I've been consulting pretty regularly through all of this. I have
Oh, that's
never
good.
made as much money in short pants as I have this year. The
Really?
last time I made money wearing short pants, I had a paper route. Um,
Nice.
and then after that, now I just like every day, it's like you got to dress from the waist up, and then the rest is pretty optional. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's
You
so
one
guys
yeah,
thing
will
we
notice I won't be standing up tonight. I'm sitting right here and I'm not standing up. Now, leave that to your imagination. Why?
we got to put that in our prep document that we send out. Pants optional.
That's
that's
right.
right.
So things have been good though. You've been able to weather the storm.
Yeah, really. And part of it is that everyone moved to the digital, to the digital platform, which was, really interesting because I think we've struggled a while with large companies with workforces all over the world, and it was always a problem. It's like how do you create equity between all the participants in a meeting or a project or something else like that? And the best laid plans kind of never worked. There was always a core that had the advantage, and they were the ones who were in the home office. And then suddenly, no one had the advantage. So actually, everyone, it kind of was a big jolt of corporate democracy. Everyone had to figure out how to work in these platforms. So I think it's pretty cool. And
Interesting.
some things that I struggled with. Oh, how are we going to do that with the team is in Germany and they're here and they're Singapore. It's like, how are we really going to do that? And how are we going to pull off some of the things that we do with people in a room? And it's critical for them to be in a room. We've actually, I think we've figured out some things and I think they work pretty well. So I suspect business class airfares are not going to be quite as lucrative as what they used to be.
Interesting. Yeah, that was one of the things that you and I had worked on together is looking at just team dynamics, and you're
Exactly.
training me on how to focus on more of that than the actual project management itself, but to watch for all
Right.
the little soft skills. So
Right.
yeah, that must be a unique area to be in this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I don't know what you guys, but I'll tell you there's a new we talk about team norms, in the past, and now you have to think about team norms, but in this medium of, and I'll tell you the one that drives me nuts is to attend a meeting and half the people switch off their video cameras entirely for the meeting. Now, I think there's a time and a place when your video camera needs to be off. We don't need to see each other 24/7.
Right.
However, I'm sort of like, I think that that's an example of in this new environment, we haven't really worked out the norms of, so is your camera on? Is it off? When it's off, why is it off? Do you have to announce it's off?
Yeah.
Have you noticed, Ken, like in your field, has there been a reluctance to rely on technology until this happened?
Wow. Reluctance to rely. No, the words were always there, but the heart wasn't.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that people weren't even, they were spending money on it too. But again, I think you just had, first of all, I think the whole, the platforms, the Zooms, the Microsoft Teams. I mean, who knew Microsoft could actually do a collaboration tool that was as good as Teams? Given that Skype comes before it, my God. And then you use Teams and you're just like, wow, they actually pulled it off. It's actually cool. It actually works.
Yeah.
It's helpful. Um,
One one of the
so
reasons
I'm sorry, go ahead.
one one of the reasons why I ask, it's kind of sounded like you're talking about how you're developing new norms with Zoom and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'm an attorney. In the legal field, lawyers are incredibly resistant to change, and they have been incredibly resistant to technology.
yeah.
And this has been, I think, probably a game changer for the
Oh,
legal
yeah.
field as far as virtual offices and how things are going to work going forward. I was just kind of curious to see how if you've noticed any changes in your field.
Yeah, I would say I think that there was an appreciation for what the technology, what was there and what how it could work, but no one was ready to bet the farm on it and say that, okay, we're going to take our office of 30 engineers in the same city, in the same building, and we're going to have them all work virtually. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have pulled that off before until until circumstances required. It's like, okay, you are all going to be in 30 different locations, and yet we need to keep doing product development. And I don't know that product development is better. There's still is a lot. You can't quite just turn around and have that quick conversation that sometimes solves a lot of knotty problems really fast. You kind of struggle for probably more on your own, a little bit more than what you did in the past. But it's also a little bit less distracting. So I think, we kind of got the big jolt of you must do it. And at least with the people that I work with, most of them had the infrastructure to do it and moved quickly to it.
And I know
Nice.
one of the
That's very
things you
interesting.
do is you'll build tools as you go to help with the teams. So have you
Okay.
come up with a whole new toolbox this year, or just a couple to survive?
It's actually the tried and true ones once again trotted out.
Yeah.
It's amazing the things you come up with, and Marie said on the introduction, it's like, yeah, I've been at it for a while, and I came to the realization. I did a tour of duty at Ernst Young in management consulting. And smart people doing interesting stuff, really big projects and things like that. And yet at the end of the day, they struggled with block and tackle, how to framework, plan work, and execute to a plan, or what we call project management. And it's sort of like, okay, which is the niche I kind of carved out for myself. It's like, if I'm taking kind of one of the top consulting organizations and working with them and seeing that that's a hole, then that's going to be a hole in other places. So some of the basics you learn along that way, it's like, they're tools and techniques that work. And it's not, and they evolve and they get better, but they're not like radically different from things you and I, used, 4, 5, 6 years ago. So
Interesting. And that's actually a perfect little segue into what I wanted to get into is, how did you discover that there was a need somewhere and then it was time to venture off and start co-founding your own thing?
oh wow. Uh, how did I discover that? Well, wow, this is really, so you have to go back to the 90s,
Okay.
the
All right.
1990s. So last century when this happened. Uh, so I grew up in the software industry, mostly in business positions, and then I switched into consulting because the software company I worked for did a crash and burn. As an aside, I mean, it was a very high flying 80s company, sort of a predecessor to the dot-com bubble, but doing capitalizing on that, and a Midwest success story, something that could have been, an Oracle back in its day, but it didn't. But at one time, it was a high flyer, and had the opportunity to kind of grow with that one as a really young guy and experience a lot of things, and I learned a lot. You also learn a whole bunch in a company that's doing a crash and burn. And it can be really painful and it can be exceptionally educational. And it's not the education you will ever get in a business school. Um, and then I switched into consulting. And consulting was interesting. Mostly that's where I got introduced into the life sciences. But it was from an IT and building IT systems, building laboratory information management systems for pharmaceutical companies. Okay, now just as it's a long story, I'm taking you a bit back, but
We got
for
time.
for the guy who, first of all, I hated chemistry. Chemistry was a struggle for me in undergraduate and graduate of Purdue, and they required 2 semesters of lab science. And I only discovered after the first miserable one of chemistry that astronomy counted as a lab science too, and it was actually cool. So, so here I barely struggle with a C in chemistry. And then what's this job I have? It's to walk into commercial laboratories at pharmaceutical companies and to automate them with computer information systems. And I don't know, I didn't know anything about it, but to walk into a pharmaceutical company and suddenly it's deja vu, all that smell comes back and you're like, oh my God, it's a giant chem lab. This is awful. I hate this industry. um, but things worked out, and I grew to actually love the industry. Never chemistry, but that's. But I was on the business side of it all the time. That company that was doing it really taught me about pharmaceuticals and doing information systems in that environment, and then business process reengineering in that environment. That was bought by Ernst Young, and that's where the tour of duty came up there. And when you move to big consulting, used to be called Big Six Consulting. You've got to do a real calculation. You work with incredibly brilliant people. You cost an incredible amount of money per hour, and you can't even imagine that. Wait, I'm me. I know who I am. It's like I'm not worth that amount of money. It's like
Yeah.
not when you grew up as a boy in the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
No one charged $450 an hour for your work in 1994. Even today, that's not a bad rate. Yeah, so you learn that, but it's a tough business, and that's why most people don't. You kind of. I think the track I was. It's like I learned a lot. I learned how to do business and consulting on really more of a global basis for very large organizations and across many countries. And then you have to do the calculation. It's like, okay, is the partner track for me, or is that a lot of people taking the value that I create and capturing that value in their pocketbooks as opposed to my pocketbook? And my calculus was, I can do this with, now you've become less the boy grows up in the Midwest and more it's like, oh my God, I am in Oz. I think I can play this game.
Yeah.
And so in a modest sort of way, you learn how to play it. And that's when I decided to go off with some other, good people that you meet and form a business. And honestly, you figure if, one day you can be billing $125 an hour, and then you turn around, you get bought by Ernst and Young, and the next month you're telling your clients that your new billing rate is 450. And yes, nothing changed except the business card changed, and that's now worth $350 more.
Yeah.
And when you learn how to say that with a straight face, then you can go out and form your own business, and you can
Sure.
do really, really well. So
Yeah.
that was the genesis of that. And then it was also learning, as I already alluded to. It's like my big revelation was I had a great opportunity to learn um, consulting methodologies, really good consulting methodologies at Ernst and Young, and also it was my first exposure to project management. And I was in a position where we were out consulting to the consultants, which,
Okay.
if you can imagine, a more I don't know what the word is, but it's, it's difficult because you've got egos and you got a lot going on there. But when you can learn to consult to consultants, and the thing that I helped them most with was how to plan and execute to their projects, and ultimately how to structure multifaceted, interrelated projects into working programs, and delivered them. I went out delivering $100 million program of hospital consolidation. That's the last thing I did before I left them, and then did a little bit smaller stuff, but interesting. Long answer to a short question. Sorry.
No, that's a great answer. That's what we were looking for. I've always heard, like on other podcasts, people talking about they remember that moment when somebody put that check in front of them or something happened where they're like, from now on, this is what you're worth and nothing
Oh
less.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
sure it must be like a humbling experience to be like,
It's
okay, I'm
yeah,
skilled enough.
yeah. No, it's well, it's not only it's skilled enough, and also that you start to understand the magnitude of how the business world works, and I mean, how, first of all, things that you and I think as mere mortals would be expensive, in the
Yeah.
scheme of things, it's not. I
Yeah.
mean, it's expensive, but but the investment that they're trying to. So I worked. E&Y in the '90s was working on video streaming, so Netflix type streaming with AT&T. I mean, it was, the internet barely existed, and you're getting that appreciation for, wait, what's the technology they're talking about? Wait, how's that going to work? But if you're the people who bring that to market, what is that worth? Well, it's clearly worth, billions of dollars. So if the consulting fees are hundreds of millions, that's reasonable. That's a very reasonable price to pay if you can realize the big opportunity. Um,
Interesting.
but I
So,
remember sitting in. So it was, I joined Ernst Young through acquisition. We were bought, the bright young consulting company that I had joined, and it was a bit of a turnaround situation, but we did a decent turnaround, and attracted. We became E&Y Indianapolis's main competitor to consulting. We were about their size and we were better, so they bought, and that was cool. Uh, and then you go through. So that's literally one day you're this, and the next day you do the same thing, but your business card changed, and so did your rate per hour change. And with the guy who was the former president of that company, I just remember we were in the Willis Tower in Chicago, sitting on the something floor and just kind of sitting there, and we were just like, yeah, we are not in Kansas anymore. We didn't know where we were, but we knew it wasn't Kansas.
yeah. So it
So
sounds like you had a good experience with the whole project man. All your like skill set was there. How hard was it to actually then go and run a business once you got there, or at least tackle more of the business side?
um, I would say, I mean, it's the reality of, you got a payroll to meet, and when
Yeah.
you're successful, first of all, if you sell the big project, then you got to staff the big project. And the way it works for any small company, it's like, okay, go catch the bear and then figure out what to do with it after you caught it. It's kind of always the approach to it. And as soon as you caught, the bear and built a cage for it, well, then you owned a bear cage, and you owned the cost of a bear cage, and you owned all the, you kind of got this stuff. And then, you have to figure out, wait, benefits? Oh, how's that? Okay. You figure it all out. Um, but I think fortunately, I had a partner who, and our mindset was always more, I think we appreciated, our value was in client facing, either winning new work or delivering existing work. And it wasn't in administering benefits. Yes, it needs to be done, or it wasn't in setting up accounting systems or anything else like that. And so pretty much those are services that, you can say, I want, you go buy the services, and you plug them in. And I think it's a real calculation that people need to make, especially starting out, in terms of, is it going to cost you something? Yes, but there's an opportunity cost to, if you spend your time on all the things where you're saving a dime, then are you going to make the $2 in billable hours? Or, in consulting, it's hundreds of dollars in billable hours to save. I don't know what an accountant costs, but they don't cost as much as what consultants cost. At least not for the basic kind of bookkeeping stuff.
When you guys were building the business, this is something that I struggle with. Murray's a little bit further along than me because I'm an attorney. I don't have a background in business, and I'm trying to build this. Did you guys come into it with any kind of goals as far as this is the kind of business we want to build, this is kind of the lifestyle we want to live, or was it more of let's just get it started, we have to make money?
I would say it was less strategic. I think because again, we were kind of in this Ernst Young big consulting framework, and you really do realize it's like there's a lot of money to be made here just by not stealing, not stealing their IP, not stealing their clients or anything else like that. But it's like what they're doing is not that radically different from once you have the know-how, you can replicate it. You can't replicate it at their scale and everything, but on a one-on-one basis or a small basis, you can. And so I think part of that was you just kind of say, there isn't and in 5 years I'll be here, and in 10 years, the big strategic plan or something else like that. I think
Sure.
It's pretty much, okay, I earn this now, and it's at best a third of what I actually bill. So if I can create that, if I can advance that two-thirds of what I bill goes in my pocket, that's a better deal.
Yep.
And then over time, that just kind of developed into, wait, do we want employees? Do we want offices? If you want offices, should you have office? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. When you guys were doing that, was there conversations about, there's obviously probably a lot of stress and a lot of time that you have to put in. If you're going to build a successful business, you got to put the time in. Was there ever any discussion about people's particular goals as far as I want to have a business that I can have a personal life, or is it just like, we got to build it? That's just the way it is. We talk about burnout a lot on here, and 10 years of being a prosecutor, for me, and experience in burnout, the last thing I want to do as I start my new business is recreate, that same thing that I went through by just overworking. So I'm kind of wondering if there's how other people approach it when they build their business.
I think we never were of the mind. It's like, oh, let's do it and let's have fun while we do this. I think it was more, hey, it's intellectually, it's stimulating, it's interesting, and that's where I've always been. It's like, I absolutely love the feeling of a tough business problem working alongside talented people. And there have been many times when I've sat around a table, with some tough situations, and it's like, you're smart, you're super smart. When you kind of feel like it's like, I'm like the least qualified. How did I get to this table? To me, that's what's always kind of driven me about it. Unless the money's cool and all of that, but to me, it's always been much more about intellectual challenge and the stimulation of it. And I think when that isn't there, then I'm less interested. So that's been my motivator. And if you can do that with a team of 2 or a team of 10, I was never motivated by let's supervise a bunch of people. Let's have multiple offices. It is cool to own an airplane. I will admit that. So.
Heck yeah!
I heard somebody say that.
Before we get there.
Yeah, we had a guy in the other day, and he was talking, and we're like, "Oh, we don't want to make you late for your flight." And he's like, "I own the plane; it's not leaving without me." Like, that's awesome. Like, hashtag life goals.
Right. Well, actually, I'll tell you, it was at one point in my life. So the pharmaceutical industry in Indiana is small, dominated by one player named Eli Lilly. And so, it's a decent sized company, but it's a middle tier pharmaceutical company, nice people. But we landed business with Abbott up in Chicago. Well, Chicago is home to, of course, Abbott's huge, and then Baxter is up there, and then you have the Japanese, the Takedas, the Estellases, et cetera. So there's a lot of industry up there that dwarfs. So the money's in Chicago, not surprising. And so I live in Indiana, and from my house to Abbott Park, on a good day, is a 3-hour drive with the middle of Chicago between me and where I need to be. And I did that drive for 10 years.
Wow.
And sometimes it's a 5-hour trip, and sometimes it's a 3-hour trip, and whatever. And along the way, I was like, I can't keep this up. And there's no train service. There's barely any commercial airplane service between Lafayette, Indiana, and Chicago, because there just wasn't. I said, I think I better get a pilot's license. So my solution was, it's like, if I'm going to commute to work, I'm going to do it on my terms. And it became, it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed learning that skill because, it's a completely different thing. And even though, it's you have to think differently, it's a different vocabulary, et cetera. But there was nothing more rewarding than to say, when I got in that plane and headed to Waukegan, Illinois, I was going to land an hour later, no matter what the traffic was down on the interstate or through Chicago or anything else like that. I'd have a lovely flight along the lake shore, looking at the skyline while the jets landing at O'Hare go over the top of you. And then you land, and there were some days that I could leave here at 7 and by 9 o'clock be at my desk at Abbott, and happy as anything. So that was my solution to the burnout I faced. Was commuting burnout, and I figured a pilot's license was the solution.
You fixed it. You heard it here first, folks. We have a cure for burnout. You just got to buy an airplane.
Actually, an airplane's not so expensive if you get a crappy one. They cost less than a Honda. So
great. That's what I do with cars. I just buy crappy ones, drive the crap out of them.
I'd like to see that risk calculation. Crappy airplane versus landing safely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Crappy does not equal unsafe.
Right. Oh, that's good. So plenty of experience. One thing we always try and give our listeners is, what's one of your biggest learning lessons? I'm sure there's a couple, but there's one or two that usually stick out, like, oh, that's something I will never forget, that we can share with the listeners, whether it's, the actual business itself or something that happened personally along the way where you just had to check yourself against life in general, or, but.
At least in consulting, I liken this. I couldn't tell you where I was, but I remember visually, where it was. But it was kind of like conference room with a whiteboard and colored markers in the tray. And you're sitting there and you're kind of listening to something, and the conversation's not exactly going anywhere or something. And as a consultant, you don't walk in with the answers. You walk in with, usually a consultant has 10% more information and, a bit more experience than you do, and has the advantage of having seen, maybe a similar situation in a different environment. So it's not like, it's that everyone's human. But I remember the scenario when it was sort of like, okay, I'm in this room because I'm supposed to affect an outcome to what's going on. And even when you're not sure, I don't know what the answer is. I may have some hints of what the answer is, but my job is to pick up the marker and to make something on that whiteboard happen. And if you're not wired to be the one who's going to pick up the marker and make something out of the spaghetti bowl that's in front of you, then I mean that to me was to me it's just like, I got to pick up the marker. I got to pick up the marker and take kind of a leadership, position in doing stuff. And it's not some secret, it's not some secret thing. Mostly it's about organization. It's about organization and capturing thoughts and clarifying what is not clear but's being talked around. And as an outsider, that's a really a valuable perspective you bring as an outsider, is because it's like, I may not know your terminology. I'm sure, I'm not a scientific guy. I hated chemistry. I'm not an engineer. So my background is in business and more in software, and even that's old software. So I don't even speak current software. So playing dumb is not hard, and it's not some fake. It's something that's like, you got to explain it to me because you're pretending like you all understand and you don't. And I mean, I know you don't. And so if you can pick up the pen, that to me is the basic thing. And the other one, I've run a lot of projects and a lot of program offices and everything. I'm pretty merciless when it comes to data. I'm sort of like, you don't have the data to back up where you stand, then you're just selling me.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you're selling me. And you want to watch me go off the deep end? Show a color chart which has no definition between it and behind it. Oh, we're all green. Based on what metrics? What calculations do you do? Based on blah blah blah. It's like, okay, no, this is a sell job. And my experience is, when I'm getting sold, I've paid the price of having been sold and believed and been trusting. And so I learned to say, it's like, no, you back it up with data, otherwise we're not going with this. And that's really harsh. But, I've got the scars on the back where I paid the price.
Yeah. I mean, you can't argue with data.
But you can't argue with data, and you can not argue about, lack of data. Lack of data is not good.
Right. Or garbage in is garbage out. It's like, why doesn't even tie together?
Yeah. And when people talk, it's like, well, we have a contract. Oh, please. 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 You know what it's going to take to enforce your rights in a contract? Good luck. And just because they promise something in a contract doesn't in any way, shape, or form mean that that's at all what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's why it's always good to have a friend like Erik.
Yeah, because I'm charging $400 an hour to work on that contract.
Who's going to tell you? It's like, you can't afford to sue them. You can't afford to pay me to go after them.
Right.
Lawsuits are expensive.
Yeah.
So in your journeys, you've done a lot of traveling. Is that something that you planned for, were excited about? Is it, I mean, we were lucky to get you on. That's one of the things that was like a silver lining with the pandemic. It's like, all right, I know he's a very busy guy and does a lot of traveling. So if we can get him, let's do it.
Yeah. And I've made one COVID trip. That was to Boston in September. So, that ventured out. No, I travel has always been something I've been interested in, and it started. When I was growing up, my parents hauled us around, my younger brother and I, to. We didn't get all 50 states growing up, but we got close. So Alaska and Hawaii came late in the game. So, and not without my parents paying for it. So. But I think, so there was always that kind of like, no, let's go out, let's see new places, etc. And then when I was in high school, I actually decided that I was done with U.S. high school when I became an exchange student in Germany. So I left the nest at 17 and went to live with a German family and go to a German school and learn the German language. And ever since then, I had really strong relationships with members of the German family today. We're still really close, and I feel super comfortable in Europe because of that. To me, it's like crossing the German border. It's that feeling of, we're home, great.
Yeah.
Wow, someplace I've always wanted to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked a lot. I didn't even know that. So I guess I learned something every time I have a conversation with Ken. I'm curious. So you've done enough traveling on the business side. Do you see a lot of similarities? Are the cultures that drastically different where it's really a struggle every place you go, or is it all pretty similar?
We are fortunate
Okay.
in that the American business model and the American expectations, the United States basically set up the global business structure. It's English that dominates. If English is going to dominate any professional or business conversation, for the most part. And it's going to be the kind of thing that even the Europeans, if they meet together, it's like, okay, it's not going to be German, it's not going to be French, it's going to be English. So we're fortunate in that, and I've been to done work in Japan, done work in Singapore. And Singapore was, of course, and these were all for American companies or affiliates of American companies.
Okay.
So the only time I worked for a foreign company was I worked for Astellas Pharmaceutical, which is Japanese pharmaceutical. But I worked for their North American affiliate in Chicago, setting up the first Brazilian affiliate for Astellas, and they decided to run that through North America, as opposed to do it out of Japan. My theory was that I don't know, this is just my theory. It's like, okay, why would you have the Americans take the charge on setting up a Brazilian affiliate for this company? And I figured Brazilians are a little challenging. It's a little bit challenging environment, a little bit different. And I figured, like, the Japanese and the Brazilians were matter and antimatter, and if they ever touched, the world would explode. So you need the Americans in between. So that was, and it worked. It worked really well. So I would say the only time that I found that the culture was really different was doing work for a German firm that had its operations based in Old East Germany, so in Greater Leipzig. Was the area. And the workforce was, skilled, knowledgeable, nice people, but it was a throwback to team structures of maybe the 80s here. I'm not sure. It was much more, tell us what to do, lay out what we're supposed to do. We will go do it. And then we'll report back that we're done. And then you tell us the next thing to do. Okay, that is not how teams in this country work. That's not how West German teams work. That's not how Singaporeans work. That's not how Japanese work. But these guys were like that. And they were driving their West German managers nuts. We, as the Americans, were just like, I think I remember this, but it's been so long. I don't think I do. So that's the only time where I really, really experienced a cultural difference that was shocking, honestly shocking. And it was just a throwback to command and control, very, very hierarchical and rigid with command and control. And, Western managers have no tolerance for it.
So it sounds like you've seen a lot of different changes in your time as far as management and how companies run. With law firms, it's another one of those hesitant to change kind of things where law firms, they kind of run focused on this is the partner of the law firm.
Yeah.
Once they get past that, a lot of law firms, and it causes burnout because they're managed terribly, because the attorneys want to focus on the law and they want to be the important partner. And they're really, in my opinion, way behind on the times on any kind of modern approach to management. Have you seen a lot of changes in your time and how these management approaches affect workers and their well-being and stuff like that?
I have. And first of all, I remember when it used to be we had to explain what a team was. Can you imagine? It's like, no, we used to teach that. And it was kind of like, okay, get ready, guys, because it's going to be a little bit radical now. But here's what we're going to, and that's why we don't even think about it anymore. It's like, oh, there's going to be a team form and there's going to be a lead. We'll talk about team norms and team behaviors and this and that and the other thing and a culture of a team and how it's different for blah, blah, blah. I mean, we can spew all of that sort of stuff. I think a lot of people can. I can, but and that used to be radical stuff that you had to teach. Now I think we still have to teach. It's like team development and team norms. We don't come prepackaged with that. And I don't think. Well, I don't know how well it's taught in the universities these days, and I don't know if it's taught how realistic it is. In any case, I think there's a lot of development to be done there. But there's always this desire to take these incredibly talented resources from all around the world, and how do we mesh them quickly into, because they start out like this, and you got to bring them like this. They need to lock, load, do it, and then peel off, because, and we all got to be cool with, hey, I really like working with Murray. I'm going to see Murray for every day for 4 months, and then I may not see him for 2 years. Yeah. And, what's that like as a personal relationship? It's like, do I keep it superficial? It's like, well, Murray, you never meant that much to me to begin with. Yeah. But that's not true, because
me too, Murray. Me too.
We form relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's tough, but I think that's where we've gotten much better at doing that, of kind of saying, okay, what's it look like when we're folded together, when we're operating as one? And then how do we also, in a meaningful way, form a relationship and then leave a relationship and then form a new relationship?
That's good. So what advice would you give to a lot of people that, at least that we're trying to attract to this podcast? We kind of pitch the idea of, we're normal guys. We didn't go to school for business, but we're trying to start a small business. What sort of advice would you give to someone that doesn't have a formal business background as a way to approach kind of building your business? And if it's going to be, more than yourself and you're going to have employees, what's a good way to, I guess, strive to build it and make it be effective and have it be a business that works instead of a business that fails with little business knowledge?
Well, that's an easy question to answer. No.
Like, wow. We got all night.
Curveball.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, it's a really interesting question, and I'm thinking. So my son is in public relations in New York City. He's in fashion PR. I didn't know what it was. He did. He figured it out, and he's good at it. He decided to start a candle company. Now he's in fashion PR. He knows the people at the New York Times. He knows the people at Vogue. I mean, that's the world that he runs in. And yet he decides to start a candle company. So what does he do? First of all, he has to figure out how to make candles. Why candles? It's not, it's kind of like, I think he thought, well, seems like I could do it. Seems like they cost a lot of money. Why can't I make candles? So is he an expert candle maker? No, but clearly he has some interest in that. And he's developed a really, really strong brand. What's he capitalizing on? He's capitalizing on, I understand marketing and product positioning. And I'm doing it around the kind of candle that I would want to buy. And I've got a hook into the name, it's Outdoor Fellow is the name of his company. And he's really good at it. He has it being sold through, I want to say not Neiman Marcus, but another one of them. I mean, people have picked him up, and basically he's a couple of people pouring candles in New York City and shipping them all over the United States, because he's used his talent. He's okay at business. I help him with accounting type stuff every once in a while. But he's leveraging, what talents did he bring to it? He understands public relations and product positioning and product development and marketing. And now he's anchored it around his passion around candles, and he's building a business of it. And I couldn't be prouder of it for it. Yeah. And I think it's that, is he making money yet? No. Is it improving? Yes. And I think you just go with, he's not desperate either. He's got a real job while he can do the other thing. And so I think to a lot of times it's like, you got to be honest. You got to take an honest self-inventory and say, not what can you do? Because if you try to do stuff that you're sucky at, you just you don't want to do it.
Yeah. What's the point if you're not passionate about it?
Yeah.
Don't. And there is someone out there who's good at it, who will do it. And you might have to pay him money, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it to have, use LegalZoom to a certain point. Sorry, Eric, and then get the attorney.
Right. Well, that's interesting that you brought that up. I mean, one of the things my company that I started which is very, very small, barely even moving, is law enforcement training. But at some point, I may want to start my own practice. And I think a lot of attorneys, they look at LegalZoom and things like that as a competitor. I'm trying to look at it differently. I think that's the direction that people want to get on apps and get things conveniently. So
right.
I have to figure out a way as an attorney where I can incorporate that into my practice and what I do. And I think if you're going to be a solo practicing attorney in the future, you're going to have to realize that things like LegalZoom are here to stay, and it's probably even going to grow. And you got to figure out how you're going to adapt to that and use it to your advantage.
Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, if nothing else, LegalZoom gives you a bunch of IP as an opening attorney. I don't know how.
Sure.
I assume that in the old days, that's what the firm kind of had. They had all this knowledge of, here's what a promissory note looks like. We have a template. Here's what a business organization thing is. Here's what all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, LegalZoom did it.
Yeah, it's getting better, and AI becoming a thing now within the legal field.
Right.
Those documents aren't perfect. A lot of attorneys have they've kind of made a practice of saying, well, you got the LegalZoom document, now hire me to fix the problems that are wrong with it. But I think as AI gets better and better and better, you're just going to see things like LegalZoom do at some point probably better work than what attorneys are going to do as the documents continue to improve. Who knows? That's
going to be the trick, is to say, okay, what's the product differentiation? It's a service, and it's something now, if you get in the fix where you say, I'm in trouble, and LegalZoom isn't going to fix the trouble. Then you can, that's one thing. But if you're in just the bread and butter of business stuff,
sure.
Then, you just got to sit back and say, okay, how do we do this?
Yes.
And recognize it as a competitor out there. So,
yeah. And I think you go ahead, Murray.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then just breaking through that old school mentality that comes with the legal industry. Eric, you and I have had a ton of conversations about this. Like, you can see where the future is going, but you have to somehow force that subject a little bit. Like, you got to convince people to take that jump.
Before COVID, the same thing like you guys are talking about, it would have been absolutely unheard of to have your attorneys working from home. Just unheard of. Like, that's just not part of the legal profession, is they hold on to old things that don't work. Everybody knows it doesn't work, but they just keep doing it.
Right.
And it's kind of frustrating. But I think you're going to see smaller firms and younger attorneys that start to become very successful because they embrace some of the changes that are going on. And you're going to see some of the old, big, powerful law firms start to kind of crumble because they're not making any changes.
Yeah.
Probably like that in a lot of fields too, I imagine.
Yeah. You brought up a good point, Ken, and we've never really talked to somebody who came from the marketing world and then entered the business. Most of the time it's the other way around. Like, I know how to run business, have no clue what to do with marketing.
Right.
So it sounds like your son and approach it completely opposite to what we're hearing.
Yeah. No, I'm it's really surprising, and when you, I don't know. He has a good enough head on his shoulders for business.
Yeah.
He's more of that type. I see him do the things he's done with the marketing and the PR and everything. And he's a really good, for me to kind of check on certain things and everything. But it's, I don't know.
Yeah. Was that something you had to learn along the way?
Sorry, what?
Was that something you had to learn along the way? Was the marketing side of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the sales. Because you have to learn that, you have to learn that's like, first of all, you got to do it. And no, it doesn't mean it's a used car. And, we all have a perception of what selling means. And it's like, I didn't get a master's degree to go sell crap. It's like, yes, you did. Because sometimes that stuff you're selling has $1 million price tag on it.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's, Murray, we talk about this a lot, but I think marketing is probably my biggest challenge. I mean, I've created my courses. I've got brochures. I've tried to do stuff on social media. I have them created, ready to go, but I have nobody buying them. It's kind of a challenge for me as an attorney to figure out how do I market this stuff. And it's a learning experience for sure.
Well, I know this guy in New York that you can talk to.
It sounds like he's doing it right. We may have to get him on here, Murray. Future episode.
I was just thinking that'd be an interesting spin for sure.
Yeah, we do brothers on the podcast. Now we can do a father-son combo, and we're really revolutionizing the podcast.
Right. Well, and then son number 2 is into real estate and flipping and real estate investment. He just loves it. Absolutely loves it.
Yeah, I bet.
He's a terrible home realtor because, he has his real estate license, but he sees housing as too much of an investment. And so when, normal people say, hey, Scott, would you show us this house? He's like, oh, please, can't you make up your mind? He has no interest in showing you 20 houses, none whatsoever. He's just like, that one's good enough and that one's the best investment. Do it.
Nice.
He's not going to buy you a sandwich or a Coke during your tours because he's not taking you on a tour.
All right. Well, we're just about out of time here. Ken, we can't thank you enough. I know you're a very busy guy. We've come to know each other over the years, and you're probably wondering why I was asking you so many questions every time we were at dinner and just wanted to understand your background. And now you know why. And, I can't thank you enough. When I first announced that I was starting this side hustle and kind of going after, whatever that next journey is, you were one of the first people to reach out, congratulated me, and, just opened up and said if I had questions to reach out. So I appreciate that. And, anyone who wants to find you, I don't know if you have a website or if you want people to find you these days, where can they reach out?
I don't.
Okay, that's fair. You're a busy man. You got enough to do already.
Yeah, I don't mind a phone call, and I don't mind talking to people, and I don't mind doing this and everything. But but I rather work. Mostly, I connect through relationships right now.
Okay.
And so it's kind of people I know and have known me, and and that just affords a more interesting thing. So
yeah, I'm sure, especially being in the consulting world, it seems a little more trustworthy and something you're getting into. It's more solid, less of a risk.
That's right. So
that's great.
Yeah, no website. I do have email. So.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll keep you the man of mystery for now.
Well, I think this is a Dumpster Fire Project exclusive. You can only find him here, folks.
Yeah, there you go.
Find him here. You got to tune into the podcast.
That's right.
Perfect.
Ken, thank you. It was nice meeting you too, and I got some really good information from you tonight, so I really appreciate it as well.
Well, it was a pleasure. This is a lot of fun.
All right, yeah, we'll have to have you on again. All right, thanks everyone.
Get son number 1 on, then you compare and contrast.
There you go.
We may have to do that.
Sounds
all right,
good.
Murray, take us home.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. Another episode of the Dumpster Fire Project in the books. Thanks, Ken. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Good night.
Thanks, Ken.